Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if desperation makes people blind to warning signs. At 18, I was a freshman at the College of Charleston, juggling a load of classes, a part-time cafe job, and the constant anxiety of never having enough money. My dad had been out of the picture for years, and my mom, a nurse working double shifts back in Greenville, could only help so much. Rent, books, and groceries were like quicksand pulling me under, and no matter how many lattes I poured or dishes I cleared, I couldn't stay afloat. It was early October when I saw the flyer. A plain sheet of paper tacked to the library bulletin board with bold black letters across the top. Babysitter needed, good pay, evenings only. The phone number had those little tear-off strips at the bottom, and by the time I walked past, only 2 were left. My fingers ripped one free before I could even think. That night, after cramming for a psychology midterm, I dialed the number. A woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was low, rushed, carrying an edge of exhaustion. "This is Mrs. Harper," she said. "You saw my flyer?" I told her yes, I was looking for babysitting work. She asked a few questions about my availability and whether I had experience with children. Then she mentioned something that caught me off guard. "We actually have 2 sons. Lucas is 8, sweet boy, a little shy. Daniel is 24, but he's mentally challenged. He functions closer to the level of a child. He just needs supervision, his routine, and his evening medication." I didn't know what to say. Babysitting a grown man wasn't exactly what I'd signed up for. Maybe she sensed my hesitation, because she hurried on. "Daniel is gentle, truly. He just needs structure. We'll go over everything. The pay is $30 an hour." My chest tightened. That was double what I made pouring coffee, and I was already staring down an overdraft fee. Against the voice in my head whispering caution, I said yes. The following Saturday, I drove out to their home in West Ashley, past rows of aging houses tucked under heavy oak trees draped in Spanish moss. The Harper house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, 2 stories with peeling blue shutters, the porch light glowing faintly in the dusk. Something about it seemed tired. Mrs. Harper met me at the door, dressed in scrubs, her purse dangling from her arm. Her husband, Dr. Harper, adjusted his tie in the foyer mirror, looking more like a man late for a meeting than a father about to leave his kids for the night. Their smiles were polite but strained, their eyes restless. "Lucas is easy," Mrs. Harper said, guiding me into the living room where a thin boy sat flipping through a comic book. "He's quiet until he warms up." Dr. Harper added, "Daniel likes video games and snacks. His medication is in the orange bottle on the kitchen counter. He takes it at 7. Please don't forget." The way he said it, sharp, deliberate, made me uneasy. I nodded anyway. What choice did I have? When I went upstairs to meet Daniel, I found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, a worn Nintendo controller in his hands. His frame was large, his shoulders broad, but when he looked up, his wide grin and rocking posture reminded me instantly of a child. "You're the babysitter?" he asked, eyes bright. "Yes," I said carefully. "I'm here to hang out tonight." He clapped once, loud enough to make me flinch. "We're gonna play Mario Kart." His laughter filled the room before it stopped abruptly, leaving silence that pressed down heavier than before. I forced a smile, but deep down, a knot had already started to twist in my stomach. The evening began almost normally. I set up snacks in the kitchen while Lucas showed me his favorite board game. He didn't say much, but when he did, his voice was small, cautious. Daniel stayed in the living room, glued to the TV, yelling and laughing at his video game. Every time his voice rose, Lucas's shoulders tensed. "Does he always get that excited?" I asked lightly, trying to ease the mood. Lucas shrugged, eyes fixed on the game board. "Sometimes." Then, after a pause, he whispered, "He's worse without his medicine." The words sank into me like ice water. By 6:50, I walked to the kitchen, my heart thudding. I found the orange pill bottle just where Dr. Harper had said, rattling the contents into my palm. 2 white tablets. Pouring a glass of water, I carried them into the living room. "Daniel," I said gently, "it's time for your medicine." He glanced up, controller still in hand. His smile was gone, replaced with a frown. "I don't want it tonight," he muttered. "You need it?" I said softly. "Your parents asked me to..." The words hadn't even left my mouth before his hand slammed down on the coffee table. The water glass tipped, spilling across the carpet. "Don't tell me what to do," he shouted. His voice cracked like a child's tantrum, but his size made the anger terrifying. Lucas flinched behind me, whispering, "Just let him." I froze, torn between following the parents' strict instructions and the fear curling inside me. Finally, I lowered the pills back into the bottle. "Okay, Daniel," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Maybe later." He stared at me for a long moment, then stomped back to his game, muttering something I couldn't make out. The rest of the night dragged under a thick cloud of tension. Every creak in the house made me jump. At one point, when I stepped into the hallway, I swore I heard footsteps upstairs. But Daniel was in the living room, and Lucas was pressed against my side. Later, as the clock neared 10, Lucas curled against the couch cushions, eyelids drooping. That's when I heard it, the faint sound of running water. I crept toward the hallway bathroom. The light was off. The room was empty. But on the tile floor, a set of wet footprints led away from the sink across the hall and toward the staircase. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice shaking. No answer. I must have dozed off sometime after midnight, sitting on the couch with Lucas tucked under a blanket beside me. His small body gave me some comfort, though my nerves stayed frayed. I didn't trust Daniel's silence upstairs. A sudden shake pulled me awake. Lucas's face was pale in the glow of the lamp. "Something's wrong," he whispered. "I heard Daniel in my room." My heart lurched. I stood, careful not to show panic, and hurried upstairs. Daniel's door was wide open. His bed was empty. From down the hall came a muffled noise, low and irregular. I pushed open Lucas's bedroom door. Daniel stood hunched over the small twin bed, his shoulders heaving. The lamp by the nightstand cast his face in harsh shadows, his eyes glassy, his hands trembling. For a second, I thought he was fixing the blanket. But then I saw the dark smear across his shirt, wet and glistening. My stomach dropped. "Daniel," I said, my voice breaking. "What are you doing?" He turned slowly, his expression twisted between a grin and a sob. "He wouldn't stop crying," he said, voice childlike, trembling. I had to make it quiet. The metallic scent hit me. Blood. I stumbled backward, my breath catching. "Oh my God!" On the bed beneath the covers, Lucas lay motionless. I screamed. The sound ripped out of me raw and loud, echoing through the walls. Daniel stepped closer, reaching out with stained hands. "You're not my mom," he whispered, almost pleading. My body moved before my mind could. I bolted down the hall, my feet pounding the stairs 2 at a time. Behind me, Daniel's heavy footsteps followed, shaking the floor. I tore into the kitchen, grabbed the cordless phone from the counter and dialed with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency?" "Help me," I sobbed. "He's killed his brother. He's coming after me, please." The crash of footsteps grew louder. I darted into the garage, slamming the door and locking it just as Daniel threw his weight against it. His fists pounded, his voice bellowing like a furious child. "You're not my mom. You can't make me." I slid to the cold concrete floor, clutching the phone to my ear, begging the operator to hurry. Minutes crawled by like hours until finally, the sound of sirens pierced the night. The garage door burst open as uniformed officers stormed inside. I scrambled back, crying, pointing at the house. Daniel's voice thundered from the hallway, roaring incoherent words until the police rushed him. I watched through the crack of the garage door as they tackled him to the ground. He thrashed, shrieking like a terrified child, his arms smeared in crimson. It took 3 officers to pin him. The Harpers arrived just as Daniel was being dragged out in handcuffs. Mrs. Harper's scream pierced the night, her knees buckling as she tried to push past the officers. Dr. Harper's face crumpled, horror etched into every line as he shouted his son's name. I sat frozen on the garage floor, unable to move, my body shaking uncontrollably. Paramedics rushed inside, but I already knew what they would find in that upstairs room. The chaos blurred together, neighbors gathering, red and blue lights flashing against the trees, officers questioning me as my voice trembled through every answer. Hours later, I finally walked out into the damp night air, clutching my backpack like a lifeline. The street was lined with squad cars, reporters already whispering behind camera lights. I kept walking until I reached my car, my legs stiff, my chest hollow. I never drove away from a house so fast. It has been years since that night. And still, I can't shake it. Sometimes I dream of Daniel's face, the strange mixture of a man's strength and a child's confusion. Sometimes I dream of Lucas's comic book, the last thing he held before everything spiraled into horror. People say time heals, but I don't believe that anymore. Time only dulls the edges of memory. The core remains, heavy and sharp. For months, I couldn't sleep without every creak of my apartment making me jump. I avoided babysitting, of course, and even my cafe job felt unbearable. Crowds, noises, men raising their voices. It all made me flinch. Therapy helped some. Talking about it, breaking it down piece by piece, naming the trauma. But nothing takes away the knowledge of what I saw, what I lived through. The Harpers moved away not long after. Rumor was Daniel was placed in a psychiatric facility. I never asked where. I never wanted to know. If there's any lesson in what happened, it's this. Desperation blinds you. I ignored the uneasy feeling in my gut because I needed money. I silenced my instincts because I thought responsibility meant pushing past fear. But instincts matter. Red flags matter. If something feels wrong, listen to yourself. No paycheck is worth ignoring that voice inside. Because sometimes when you ignore it, the nightmare that follows will haunt you for the rest of your life. By the time I reached my mid-20s, babysitting wasn't just a side hustle, it was a part of my identity. Parents trusted me with their children, their homes, their routines, and their peace of mind. I'd handled toddlers with fevers, teenagers testing boundaries, and every form of tantrum in between. Over the years, I'd learned to stay calm in emergencies, carry myself with confidence, and anticipate danger before it happened. At least, that's what I thought. It was a rainy Friday night in late spring of 2019, and I had settled into the kind of evening I secretly loved. Leftover pasta reheated on the stove, a blanket pulled over my lap, and the hum of my apartment's radiator lulling me into comfort. My phone buzzed on the counter. The number was unfamiliar, and normally I let those go to voicemail, but for some reason I answered. "Hi, is this Emily?" The voice was warm, female, almost trembling. "This is Lydia Brenner. A friend from church gave me your number. We're in a bind. Our sitter canceled last minute. Could you possibly come watch our son tonight? We'd be forever grateful. We'll pay generously." I pressed the phone to my ear, weighing it. I didn't know the Brenners. It was already past 8. Something inside me told me to decline, but then the word generously collided with the memory of my rent statement on the fridge. "Sure," I heard myself say. "Send me the address." The house was in a quiet Cincinnati suburb, the kind with old oak trees dripping rainwater onto long driveways and brick homes that seemed pulled out of a postcard. When I pulled up, the Brenner place glowed with golden light behind ivy-framed windows. Lydia opened the door before I even knocked, a navy dress hanging off her frame, perfume sharp and floral. She was beautiful, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you so much," she said, handing me an envelope of cash before I could speak. "Our son Evan is in the living room. He's 10. Martin, my husband, and I will be back by midnight." Martin appeared behind her, tall and polite but strangely distracted. His gaze kept darting down the hallway behind me, as though he expected someone to emerge from the shadows. It unsettled me, though I tried not to show it. Inside, the warmth of the house felt welcoming enough, and in the living room, Evan sat cross-legged on a rug, glasses slipping down his nose as he mashed buttons on a video game controller. He looked up with shy curiosity, then smiled. "Hi," he said. "Want to play Mario with me?" I smiled back, grateful for the simplicity of children. "Of course," I said, settling in. As the rain streaked against the windows, I told myself this would be just another babysitting gig. But deep down, the unease that started with Martin's eyes hadn't gone anywhere. It was only waiting. Evan was a sweet kid, polite and eager to share his game with me. We played for nearly an hour, his laughter softening the heaviness of the storm outside. For a little while, I forgot the unease that had followed me in. But then Evan put down his controller abruptly and tilted his head toward the hallway. His eyes widened behind his glasses. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I froze, listening. The rain tapped the glass, the refrigerator hummed, but nothing else. "Hear what?" I asked. "There's someone in the hallway." His voice was steady, too steady for a 10-year-old. I forced a chuckle. Houses make noises, especially in the rain. Wood swells, pipes creak. "No," he interrupted. "It's him. He's here again." Something about the way he said it, so sure, so resigned, made my skin prickle. I stood slowly, walking to the edge of the hallway. The floor creaked beneath me, and the shadows stretched long and dark. At the far end, a door stood ajar, just enough to suggest someone might be behind it. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound calm. My voice seemed to dissolve into the silence. When I turned back, Evan's face was pale. His gaze wasn't on me. It was fixed just over my shoulder. I spun around, and for a split second I saw it, a pale eye peering through the narrow gap of the closet door. My heart skipped. The door creaked shut an inch as if someone had just pulled back. Every instinct screamed at me. I walked quickly back to the living room, my face stiff with a smile that wasn't real. "See? Nothing there." But Evan's hands gripped the hem of his shirt. His voice trembled. "You saw him, didn't you?" I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to say it was just my imagination, the storm playing tricks. But I had seen it. That unmistakable glint of an eye watching me. "Evan," I said carefully, "who do you think is in the hallway?" He shook his head, refusing to answer. His silence was worse than anything he might have said. I crouched down. "Listen, if there's someone here, we're going outside, right now." "But he doesn't like when I leave," Evan whispered. The words chilled me. He spoke like it was a rule, something ingrained. I didn't push further. I grabbed his hand, flicked off the TV, and guided him to the door. That's when a low voice drifted from the hallway, steady, male, too close. "It's okay, Evan. I'm here to watch you." My blood turned to ice. Evan clutched me so hard his nails dug into my arm. "That's not my dad's voice," he whispered. I bolted, dragging him with me, and threw open the front door. Rain hit us like needles, soaking my clothes in seconds. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. "There's someone in the house," I stammered. 2430 Willow Creek Lane. He's in the hallway closet. Please, send help." The dispatcher's calm voice grounded me as I clutched Evan, who was shivering against my chest. "Stay on the line. Officers are on their way." I stood in the driveway, rain plastering my hair to my face, staring at that glowing house as though it might swallow us whole. The minutes dragged like hours. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. Then finally, flashing red and blue lights split the street. 2 officers sprinted toward us, and I pointed with a trembling hand. "He's in the house, in the hallway closet. He spoke to us." The officers exchanged a look, weapons drawn, and pushed through the door. I held Evan tight, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe." But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. When the officers re-emerged, their grips were firm on the arms of a man I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, gaunt, drenched, with darting eyes that wouldn't stay still. His hoodie clung to him from the rain, and his voice was calm in a way that made my stomach turn. "I was hired to babysit," he muttered, over and over. I was told to come tonight. Lydia and Martin pulled up moments later, rushing from their car. Lydia's scream split the night when she saw Evan clinging to me, soaked and shaking. Martin's face drained of all color when he caught sight of the man in cuffs. "Do you know him?" one officer asked. They both shook their heads violently. "Never," Martin said. His voice cracked. I overheard the other officer say quietly to his partner, "He's been inside a while. Food wrappers, blankets in the closet." The thought made me gag. He'd been living in their home, waiting, watching. I stayed long enough to give my statement, though my mind felt splintered. The Brenners thanked me through tears, Lydia clutching Evan as though she'd never let him go again. But behind their gratitude was a heavier truth, a shame that maybe they'd missed the signs, an unlocked window, a noise ignored, shadows dismissed as nothing. When I finally got home, I peeled off my soaked clothes and sat on the edge of my bed in silence. Every creak of my apartment made me jump. My eyes lingered on the closet door across the room until I finally got up and shoved a chair against it just to breathe. Sleep never came. I kept replaying that single moment, the pale eye watching me from the crack of the door. Even now, years later, when I babysit on occasion, I cannot walk down a hallway without turning on every light. I cannot hear the words, "I'm here to watch you," without my stomach twisting. Because that night, in a house that looked so ordinary from the outside, I learned a lesson I should have already known. Danger doesn't always announce itself with noise or violence. Sometimes it waits in silence, watching, patient, until the exact moment you let your guard down. The moral is simple but unforgettable. Never ignore your instincts. A babysitter's job isn't just to care for children, it's to protect them, even from dangers no one else wants to believe are real. When I think back to my childhood, I remember a neighborhood that looked like a Norman Rockwell painting had spilled out into real life. White picket fences, mailboxes shaped like barns, yards scattered with swing sets and trampolines. It was the early 2000s and I was 7 years old, living just outside Burlington, Vermont. On summer evenings, bikes clattered down the sidewalks until the streetlights blinked on. In fall, the air carried that crisp bite, and kids like me stomped through crunchy leaves on the way home from school. People left their doors unlocked. My mom never worried about me walking down the block to visit a friend. But what nobody tells you as a kid is that safety is only ever an illusion, a bubble your parents build for you. I didn't know that then. I believed in it fully, and I trusted that adults, the tall people with their car keys and deep voices and credit cards, were the guardians of that safety. They were the protectors. They were the ones who made the rules. One of the guardians I loved most was my cousin Jenna. She was 16 at the time, a high school sophomore with braces and streaks of blue in her hair. She babysat me often, and I thought she was the coolest person alive. She wasn't the type who shoved you in front of a TV and scrolled through her phone all night. She painted her nails at the kitchen table, read magazines out loud just to make me laugh at the gossip, and let me stay up an extra half hour if I promised not to tell my mom. The night it happened was late October. The trees outside had already turned bare, branches scratching at the sky like bony hands. My parents were going to a neighborhood dinner party, and Jenna arrived right before dusk, lugging her backpack full of homework and a couple of glossy magazines. She dropped them on the couch and ruffled my hair. "Don't worry," she said to my mom, grinning like she had everything under control. "I've got him. We'll be fine." I remember feeling so safe watching my parents walk out the door, leaving me with Jenna. I had no way of knowing that a neighbor's smile could be more dangerous than the dark outside. The house felt cozy that night. Our living room was small, with wood-paneled walls and a big bay window looking out over the quiet street. The TV hummed softly while I sat at the coffee table coloring. Jenna sat nearby with her chemistry notes spread across her lap, muttering formulas to herself. Outside, the wind rattled the bare branches, and dry leaves skittered across the sidewalk. Around 7:30, the landline rang. Jenna answered it, her voice dropping to a hushed tone. After a quick exchange, she hung up, frowning. "It's my friend," she said, tucking the phone under her chin as she grabbed her jacket. "She needs me to drop something off real quick. I'll be gone 10 minutes tops. Stay here, okay? Don't open the door for anyone." I nodded. At 7, I believed every word she said. She was older, responsible. If she said 10 minutes, it meant 10 minutes. The house changed once she left. It felt bigger, emptier. The TV flickered, filling the silence, but every creak of the floorboards or sigh of the furnace seemed louder. I curled up on the couch, clutching a pillow, waiting for the sound of her car pulling back in the driveway. Instead, I heard 3 knocks on the front door, steady, measured. I froze. My first thought was Jenna. Maybe she forgot something. I rushed to the door and flung it open. It wasn't Jenna, it was Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence lived 2 houses down. He was in his 50s, heavy-set, with thinning gray hair and glasses that always slid down his nose. I'd seen him mow his lawn, wave at my parents across the fence, sometimes stop at the mailbox. He was just another neighbor, another adult I assumed was safe. That night, though, he didn't look safe. He smiled, but the smile didn't match his eyes. It was too wide, stretched across his face like he'd practiced it in the mirror. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly. His voice carried a false warmth, like he was pretending to be gentle. "Is Jenna here?" I shook my head. "She went out." His smile tightened. So you're here alone?" The way he said it made my stomach twist. I gripped the doorknob harder. "Why don't you let me wait inside?" he asked, leaning slightly forward. "It's cold out here." I was raised to be polite, to say yes to adults, to not argue. My instinct was to open the door wider, to let him step in. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, maybe just a child's unexplainable intuition, but I shook my head. "My parents said I can't let anyone in," I muttered. His smile faltered. For a split second, his face looked like something cracked through the surface. Frustration, anger, I don't know. Then he chuckled, low and dry. "You're a good boy," he said, though the words sounded disappointed. "Always following the rules." He turned, walked down the steps and disappeared into the night. Minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway. Jenna walked in, shaking the cold from her jacket, and found me pale-faced on the couch. "What's wrong?" she asked, kneeling down. I told her everything. About the knock, about Mr. Lawrence asking to come inside, about how he smiled. Her face drained of color. She locked the door, yanked the curtains shut, and sat on the couch beside me, pulling me close. "Don't open the door again," she whispered firmly. When my parents came home later, Jenna told them. They exchanged uneasy looks, but then brushed it off. "He probably just wanted to borrow something," my dad said. "Don't make a big deal out of it." But Jenna's eyes told me she didn't buy that explanation. For the rest of the night, she kept glancing at the window, her shoulders tense. As a kid, I didn't think much of it after. Life moved on. School, friends, growing up. That night blurred into the background like a bad dream. It wasn't until years later that the memory came back with new weight. I was 19, home from college for the summer, when my mom mentioned it casually over breakfast. She was flipping through the paper, sipping coffee. "Did you hear about Mr. Lawrence?" she asked. "He was arrested last month. They said he'd been luring kids in neighboring towns. Terrible things. Just awful." I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. My mom kept talking, but I didn't hear her. All I could see was his smile. The question, "So you're here alone?" It hit me like a delayed punch. That night hadn't been harmless. It hadn't been a neighborly visit. I'd been one polite answer away from disaster. The memory haunts me still. Sometimes when I'm alone, I hear those 3 knocks echoing on the door. I imagine if I had stepped aside, if Jenna had taken longer, if I had been too polite to say no. What I learned is something I carry to this day. Danger doesn't always look like a shadow in the hallway or a monster under the bed. Sometimes it looks like a neighbor, smiling on your porch, waiting for you to invite it inside. The moral of my story is simple but sharp. Trust your instincts, no matter how young or small you are. Politeness should never come at the cost of safety. Not every adult deserves your trust, and sometimes the scariest dangers are the ones that seem the most ordinary. If I close my eyes, I can still see the glow of the neon sign flickering against the rain-soaked pavement that night. Tacoma was always wet in December, the kind of wet that seeps into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. That Friday, December 14th, 2012, started like any other, mundane, uneventful, and quietly boring. But it ended in a way I never could have imagined, a night that carved itself into my memory with jagged edges that still sting today. I was 17 back then, right on the edge of adulthood, though I didn't feel like it. My parents had gone out for their anniversary dinner downtown and left me responsible for my 12-year-old sister, Lena. Babysitting her wasn't unusual. I'd done it 100 times before. But that night, I didn't feel like sitting around the house alone with her. Our neighborhood always felt too quiet at night, like the silence itself was listening. So I suggested something different. "Let's go hang out with Travis at work," I told her. Travis was my cousin, a couple years older, and he had landed a night shift job at the 7-Eleven on East 38th Street. It wasn't glamorous, but he never minded me stopping by. He always said having family there made the hours go faster. "Are you sure Mom and Dad would be okay with that?" Lena asked. She was cautious by nature, the kind of kid who read warning labels on cereal boxes. "They'll be fine with it," I assured her. "It's better than sitting around in that creaky house by ourselves. Plus, free Slurpees." That was all the convincing she needed. We threw on our jackets, and by 10:45, we were perched inside the store like two birds out of place. The 7-Eleven wasn't much. Yellowed fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly pale hue. The aisles smelled faintly of burnt coffee and cheap floor cleaner. Outside, a single streetlight flickered, making the parking lot look like a stage for something bad waiting to happen. But at the time, I thought it felt safe, bright, monitored, cameras in every corner, and with Travis behind the counter, we weren't really alone. Lena spread her math homework across one of the tiny plastic tables near the window, while I flipped through a tabloid magazine. Travis leaned against the register, half listening to some tinny song on the radio, and joked about how he was living the dream, endless access to taquitos and day-old donuts. For a while, it felt ordinary. So ordinary that I almost forgot about my grandmother. Evelyn Bennett lived just a few blocks from us, though lived is a generous way to put it. She existed there, more ghost than person. My mother had cut ties years ago, after Evelyn's paranoia and untreated schizophrenia had grown too dangerous to ignore. She would disappear for weeks, sometimes show up at our doorstep, demanding to see us, insisting the world was out to get her. My mom always told me, "She's not safe, Claire. She's not herself anymore." Still, Lena sometimes asked about her. That night, she looked up from her homework, chewing on her pencil. "Do you think Grandma knows we're here?" I laughed softly. "No, Lena. She doesn't even know where we are." But even as the words left my mouth, I felt a chill crawl up my arms. Because if there was one thing I'd learned about Evelyn, it was that she had a way of appearing exactly where you didn't expect her. And as it turned out, I was right. The bell above the door jingled at exactly 11:30. At first, I didn't look up. I figured it was just another customer grabbing smokes or beer before midnight. But when Lena's hand gripped my arm, nails digging through my sleeve, I raised my head. It was her. Grandma Evelyn stood in the doorway, rain dripping from her too large coat. She looked thinner than I remembered, her hair unkempt and sticking to her damp cheeks. Her eyes darted across the store before landing on us, widening in relief. "Girls," she whispered, her voice trembling but oddly soft. "You're here. You're safe." Lena's grip tightened, and I swallowed hard, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Grandma," I said carefully, standing to my feet. "It's late. What are you doing here?" Her gaze flickered toward the glass door, then back to me. I couldn't sleep. I had to make sure he doesn't get you. Travis straightened behind the counter, his eyebrows raised in question. I gave him a look that said, "Don't do anything yet." Evelyn stepped further inside, water dripping from her sleeves onto the linoleum. She began pacing the aisles, muttering to herself. Every so often she'd pick up a snack, examine it, then drop it back onto the shelf with unnecessary force. "She's scaring me," Lena whispered. "Can we just go home?" But the rain outside was coming down harder now, and Evelyn hovered near the door like a guard. Leaving didn't feel like an option. At one point, she reached into her bag and pulled out a handful of pill bottles, shaking them like rattles. "They want me to forget," she hissed. "But I won't. He's outside. He's watching." The words hung heavy in the stale store air. "Do you want me to call the cops?" Travis whispered when Evelyn turned away. I shook my head. I knew the police had been called on her before. Each time ended the same, with her crying, begging, insisting she wasn't dangerous. She wasn't a criminal. She was sick, but sickness could still be dangerous. I walked closer, lowering my voice. "Grandma, you're scaring Lena. Why don't you sit down? Have some coffee? Warm up a little?" Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a brief second I saw something. Recognition, love, fear, all tangled together. But then it was gone, replaced by something darker. "You don't understand, Claire," she whispered, leaning in. "He's coming tonight." And the way she said it, I almost believed her. By midnight, the store was empty except for us. The freezers hummed. The rain pounded against the windows. My chest felt tight with every second that passed. Evelyn had seated herself at our tiny table now, directly across from Lena. Her hands trembled as she reached forward, brushing a strand of hair from Lena's face. "You look just like your mother when she was your age," she whispered. Lena recoiled, and I yanked the chair back quickly. "Don't touch her," I snapped. Evelyn's face twisted. "Don't you tell me what I can do. I raised your mother, and she turned her back on me. Do you think you're better? You're not safe, Claire, none of you are." The words sliced through the air. Travis leaned over the counter, mouthing again, "Call the cops." I shook my head once more, though my resolve was crumbling. My grandmother wasn't just confused tonight, she was spiraling. Every glance at the door, every muttered phrase about him, made the hairs on my neck rise. I tried again, softer this time. "Grandma, please, no one's coming. You're safe here. We're safe." But she wouldn't hear it. She stared at the glass door, her eyes wide and unblinking. "He waits until the lights go out," she murmured. "That's when he comes." I felt a chill so deep I thought I might shake apart. The rational part of me knew it was delusion, a figment of her sickness. But the other part, the part that had grown up hearing creaks in the night and whispers in dark hallways, couldn't shake the possibility that she was right. At 12:20, she suddenly stood, knocking the table over. Lena's soda spilled across the floor, her homework scattering. Evelyn's voice rang out sharp and frantic. "Time's running out. We have to hide." She lunged for Lena's wrist, her grip shockingly strong. Lena screamed, jerking back. "Stop it," I yelled, shoving her arm away. "You're hurting her." For a split second, Evelyn froze, staring at me as though she didn't recognize who I was. Then she turned and staggered toward the restroom, muttering about locking the door before he arrives. That was when Travis picked up the phone and called the police. The wait for the police felt like hours. Lena sobbed quietly beside me, clutching my arm so tight it hurt. I kept whispering that it would be okay, though I didn't believe it. From behind the locked bathroom door, Evelyn's voice drifted out in fragments. "He knows. He's close. Don't let him take them." Her words echoed in that empty store, every syllable gnawing at me. When the flashing lights finally spilled across the wet parking lot, relief hit me so hard my knees nearly buckled. 2 officers entered, calm but cautious. Travis pointed toward the bathroom. It took nearly 30 minutes of coaxing before Evelyn finally emerged. She looked smaller now, shrunken, her fury drained. When one officer gently took her arm, she didn't resist. She only whispered, "I kept them safe. I did what I had to." They led her out into the rain, her silhouette illuminated by red and blue strobes. Lena wouldn't stop crying. She buried her face against me, trembling. I stroked her hair, repeating, "It's over. It's okay now," though my chest still pulsed with unease. But even then, even as I watched them guide my grandmother into the back of a cruiser, I couldn't shake her words. "He's coming tonight." And I wondered, what if she hadn't been entirely wrong? 2 weeks later, Evelyn was gone. An untreated infection had taken her before the hospital could help. When my mother told me, I didn't know what to feel. Grief, yes, but also guilt. Guilt for being afraid of her. Guilt for being relieved that she was gone. In the years since, I've replayed that night 1,000 times. The rain on the glass, the flicker of the neon sign, my grandmother's eyes, wild and desperate, begging us to believe her. Sometimes I wonder if she truly saw something that night. Maybe the man outside was only a shadow in her mind, born of sickness. But sometimes when I pass a convenience store late at night, I catch my own reflection in the window and wonder if someone else is watching too. The truth is, it doesn't matter whether the danger was real or imagined. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Fear doesn't always wear the face of a stranger. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you love, someone who once kissed you goodnight and baked you cookies after school. And it taught me another lesson too, one I'll carry for the rest of my life. Mental illness doesn't make someone less human, but ignoring it can make them dangerous. My grandmother needed help long before that night. Help she never got. The moral I carry is simple but hard-earned. Love isn't enough without action. You can love someone with all your heart, but if you ignore their sickness, if you leave them alone in the dark with their demons, eventually those demons come spilling out. And sometimes, they come for you. Looking back, I don't know why I thought it was a good idea. Maybe it was my teenage brain convincing me I could handle more than I could. Maybe it was the need to distract two restless kids on a long summer night. Or maybe it was just that mix of boredom and overconfidence that seems to live in every 17-year-old. It was Saturday, June 3, 2017, in Phoenix, Arizona, and the heat still clung to the air even though the sun had set. The Lambert family lived a few houses down from mine, and I had been babysitting their kids, Lucas, 9, and Mia, 6, for almost a year. Their parents, Mark and Danielle, were the kind of neighbors who waved from their driveway and always promised extra cash if I stayed late. They were headed to a wedding that night and told me they'd be home after midnight. When the kids begged for snacks, I figured a quick trip to the 7-Eleven on West Bethany Home Road would be harmless. It was close, maybe a 5-minute walk, and I thought the bright lights and open doors would be safer than sitting in a quiet house for hours. I didn't tell the Lamberts because honestly, I knew they wouldn't approve. But it felt like such a small risk at the time. The night was restless. Lucas had been bouncing off the walls, challenging every rule, while Mia stayed quiet, drawing at the kitchen table, occasionally glancing at me with those wide eyes of hers. She had a way of sensing tension that most kids her age wouldn't. When I suggested the snack run, Lucas cheered and bolted for his shoes. Mia hesitated, asking softly if it would be dark on the way there. I promised her the streetlights would be on and we'd be fine. We cut across the neighborhood, the sidewalk still warm under our sneakers, the hum of air conditioners buzzing from nearly every house. The 7-Eleven stood at the corner beside an auto shop and a laundromat that was dark and closed for the night. Its neon sign flickered, bathing the lot in a pale green glow. A silver sedan sat under a crooked streetlight, its engine running low and steady. I remember that detail now, but at the time it barely registered. Inside, the store smelled like overcooked hot dogs and cleaning solution. The cashier, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 20, leaned against the counter with earbuds tucked in, nodding to some beat only he could hear. Lucas darted to the candy aisle like it was a treasure hunt, while Mia stayed close to me, her fingers curled into the hem of my shirt. She whispered, "It feels weird in here." I squeezed her hand and smiled. "It's just late, that's all. We'll be quick." At that moment, nothing about the store screamed danger. It was just another convenience store with buzzing lights and tired shelves. But even then, some instinct pressed against the back of my mind. Something uneasy I ignored. That was the first mistake. I kept telling myself it was just a snack run. That mantra circled in my head as I guided Mia toward the chips. Lucas had already picked up a candy bar, eyeing the energy drinks with the kind of longing kids save for things they know they can't have. "Can I get one?" he asked, holding up a neon green can. I shook my head. "Nice try. Candy's fine, but no caffeine bombs at 10 at night." He sighed dramatically, muttering, "You're no fun," before stomping down the aisle. It was typical Lucas, stubborn and dramatic, but harmless. I turned back to Mia, who was staring at the freezer doors like they might open by themselves. "What about ice cream?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. She smiled faintly, but her grip on my hand tightened. That's when I noticed Lucas had wandered toward the back of the store. "Lucas," I called, "stay where I can see you." "Stay." No answer. Just the soft sound of his sneakers scuffing against the linoleum. I felt irritation spark in my chest, but beneath it was a flicker of unease. I started to follow, tugging Mia along, but before I could reach him, he reappeared, holding the same candy bar as before. "Relax," he said, though his voice was quieter than usual. His eyes kept darting toward the rear storage room. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," he muttered quickly, shoving the candy bar into his pocket. Something about his face unsettled me. He wasn't scared exactly, but he wasn't himself either. I wanted to press him, but with Mia watching, I let it go. I figured he'd just spooked himself in the dim back corner. At the counter, I fumbled with my wallet while Mia tugged my sleeve. "Why is that man looking at us?" she whispered. My chest tightened. Slowly, I turned, and there he was. A tall man in a dark hoodie, standing halfway down the snack aisle. He wasn't holding anything, wasn't pretending to shop. He was just watching. The cashier didn't notice, still nodding to his music. My palms went slick as I forced a smile at the kids. "Come on, time to go." I grabbed their hands and headed for the door. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I tried to stay calm, to keep it normal. But then Lucas yanked his hand free. "I left something," he shouted and bolted back toward the rear of the store. "Lucas!" I screamed, panic rising like fire in my throat. And that's when everything began to unravel. Dragging Mia beside me, I sprinted toward the back. When I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. Lucas stood in the open doorway of the employees-only storage room. Kneeling beside him was the man in the hoodie. He leaned close, whispering something I couldn't hear. Lucas's face was pale, frozen between curiosity and fear. "Lucas!" I yelled. The man's head snapped up. His face was shadowed by the hood, but I caught the glint of teeth in a grin that felt all wrong, too sharp, too deliberate. Without a word, he shoved past me. For a second, I thought he was leaving. Relief almost washed over me. Then I realized he had grabbed Mia. Her scream sliced through the store. I lunged forward, but the man was faster. He barreled toward the exit, dragging her small frame against his chest. I shouted for help, my voice hoarse, but the cashier only pulled out his earbuds in confusion. "What's going on?" he stammered, too late. By the time I reached the glass doors, the man had burst into the night. The silver sedan under the flickering streetlight roared to life. Tires screeched, headlights flared, and then it was gone. Mia's scream fading into the distance. I collapsed onto the pavement outside, my legs trembling so hard I could barely stand. Lucas ran into me, sobbing uncontrollably, his fists clutching my shirt. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating. "It's my fault. He told me he knew Mom. He told me to come see." I wrapped my arms around him, trying to steady us both. But the night tilted out of balance. My voice cracked as I screamed for someone, anyone, to call the police. The hum of the neon sign buzzed above me, indifferent, as if nothing had happened at all. The police arrived within minutes, red and blue lights washing over the rain-slick pavement. I tried to recount everything, the man, the hoodie, the silver sedan, but the details slipped through my mind like water. I could only remember fragments, the way his smile cut across his face, the grip of his arms around Mia, the sound of tires screeching as the car disappeared. The officers spoke calmly, their notebooks open, but I could hear the urgency in their voices when they radioed in the description. Lucas sat in the back of a squad car wrapped in a blanket, still crying that it was his fault. "It's not your fault," I told him over and over, even though part of me wanted to scream that it was. That if he hadn't run off, if he hadn't trusted that stranger, none of this would have happened. But I couldn't blame him. He was 9 years old, and I was the one who should have known better. The Lamberts arrived within the hour, faces pale and twisted with terror. Danielle collapsed against an officer when she realized Mia was gone, her sobs echoing across the parking lot. Mark's eyes found mine, and in that look I saw everything he didn't say. "You were supposed to keep them safe." For weeks, Phoenix was plastered with flyers of Mia's face. Volunteers combed neighborhoods, officers knocked on doors, and every night the news carried her story. A little girl with wide brown eyes, last seen at a 7-Eleven with her babysitter. But no one found her. The sedan was never traced. The man in the hoodie might as well have disappeared. I spent those weeks replaying the night in my head until it blurred into nightmares. I saw her hand slipping from mine. I heard her scream echoing in my ears until I wanted to tear them off. I walked through every detail, punishing myself for not leaving sooner, for not recognizing the danger, for thinking a convenience store was safer than home. The Lamberts never blamed me out loud. Danielle hugged me once and whispered, "You did your best." But I saw it in their eyes every time. The question that would never leave them. Why didn't you do more? Years have passed, but the memory of that night clings to me like a shadow. Sometimes when I drive past that same 7-Eleven, I have to pull over because the sight of the buzzing lights and the smell of burnt coffee pouring from the door makes my chest tighten until I can't breathe. I still babysit sometimes, though rarely. I lock every door the moment parents leave, and I never ever take kids out of the house at night. But no rule I follow now can erase what happened. Lucas is older now, a teenager himself. He avoids me when we cross paths, and I don't blame him. I remind him of the night he lost his sister, of the scream that split our lives in two. The Lamberts moved a few years later, chasing a fresh start, though I doubt they ever found it. As for me, I carry the regret like a scar no one can see. I dream about Mia, her small hand in mine, her voice whispering she didn't like how the store felt at night. Maybe she knew. Maybe she sensed what I refused to acknowledge, that safety is never guaranteed, not in bright lights, not in quiet neighborhoods, not even in the places we trust most. The lesson came too late, but it's one I'll never forget. When you're responsible for someone else, their safety is never a small risk. One wrong decision can change everything, and the cruelest part of regret is knowing you can never go back and make it right. Sometimes the biggest dangers hide in ordinary places, and responsibility means never ignoring the small voice that tells you something isn't right. The cost of underestimating risk can be irreversible, and regret is the heaviest burden to carry. I used to think autumn nights in Oregon had a beauty to them. The smell of wet leaves, the amber glow of streetlights against slick pavement, the faint smoke rising from chimneys. It was the kind of atmosphere people wrote poems about. But now, whenever October comes around, I remember a night when that same atmosphere turned from comforting to suffocating. It was Thursday, October 10th, 2019. I was 16, babysitting for the Henderson family. They lived on a quiet street not far from Lancaster Drive. the kind of suburban pocket that sat just close enough to the busier side of town that you never fully felt safe walking alone after dark. They had 2 kids, Lucas, age 8, and Emma, age 6. Both sweet kids who went to bed without a fight that night. By 9:30, the house was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the gutters. Babysitting had been my way of helping my mom since I was 13. She worked long shifts as a nurse, sometimes doubling, and I knew how badly we needed the money. My dad hadn't been around in years, so I felt like every extra dollar I earned mattered. Still, part of me liked the responsibility. Babysitting gave me control, or at least the illusion of it. That night, though, the silence inside the house was so heavy that I felt trapped. I stepped onto the porch to breathe in the cold air, pulling my hoodie tighter against the drizzle. From there, I could see the glow of the 7-Eleven sign across the intersection. Its red and green neon shimmered in the wet pavement, always humming, always awake. In a town where most places shut down early, that little convenience store was a constant reminder that not everyone was asleep. I never thought much of it before. To me, 7-Eleven was just a place where kids my age got Slurpees after school or where truckers parked their rigs for a late-night coffee. But that night, it became something else. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Cars hissed down the wet road now and then, their headlights slicing through the mist. But around 10:15, I caught sight of something that made my breath stick in my throat. A man stumbled into view, illuminated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the store. He was tall, soaked from the rain, and hunched forward as though he were hurt. At first I thought he might be drunk. We got plenty of those wandering out from the bars on Lancaster. But then he gripped his side, leaning hard against the payphone outside the store. Even from across the street, I could see the smear of something dark on his sleeve. Blood. My first instinct was worry. My second was fear. I stepped back from the porch, pulling the door shut behind me. But curiosity gnawed at me, and I peeked through the living room curtains again. He was still there, slumped against the payphone, head bowed as if he might collapse. My chest tightened. He needed help. But I was just a kid inside a house that wasn't mine, responsible for 2 sleeping children. My stomach churned as I debated whether to pick up the phone. Finally, I did. I dialed the non-emergency police line, trying to keep my voice calm as I explained, "There's a man outside near the 7-Eleven. He looks hurt." The operator asked for details. I glanced out again and my heart nearly stopped. The man wasn't by the payphone anymore. He was standing across the street, on the corner, and he was staring directly at the Hendersons' house. I froze at the window. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't even shift his weight. He just stood there in the rain, shoulders slouched, head tilted ever so slightly like he was studying the house. I whispered into the phone, "He's across the street now, he's watching the house." The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "Stay inside. Keep the doors locked. Officers are on the way." I hung up, my hands trembling. I told myself he was probably drunk and disoriented. Maybe he didn't even see me. Maybe I was imagining the way his eyes seemed to fix on the living room window. But then, a thought slid in and lodged itself in my mind. What if he saw the lights on and knew I was here? I killed the lamp beside the couch, plunging the room into darkness. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, pale and scared. The minutes dragged. Every tick of the clock was loud enough to set my nerves on edge. Upstairs, I checked on Lucas and Emma, who were sound asleep, their small breaths steady. For a second, I envied their innocence, the way danger was still just a word in their world, not something standing across the street in the rain. I returned to the living room and pulled the curtains tighter. That's when the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. My eyes flew to the front door. Through the peephole, I saw him. The man from the parking lot. His hood was down now, dark hair plastered to his forehead, his skin pale under the porch light. He leaned against the frame like he might collapse. "Please," he rasped. His voice was hoarse, desperate. I need help. Just a phone. Just let me inside. My mouth went dry. Everything in me screamed not to open the door. But another part, the part my mom had raised me with, hesitated. What if he really was hurt? What if this was life or death? "I've called someone for you," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "The police are on their way." The change in his tone was instant. The pleading cracked into something sharp. "Don't do that," he snapped. His eyes lifted to the peephole, and for a moment it felt like he could see me staring back. "I don't need the cops. Just let me in. It'll be easier." Easier. The word chilled me more than anything. I backed away from the door, clutching the house phone like it was a weapon. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The drip of rain from the eaves, the hum of the fridge, even my own ragged breathing. Then came the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow. Heavy. He wasn't leaving. He was circling. The rain hammered harder, making the roof creak. I crouched low in the hallway, every muscle tight, listening to his movements. The scrape of a shoe against siding, the faint thud near the windows, then silence. For 10 agonizing minutes, I lived in that silence. My mind painted pictures of him crawling along the walls, peering into cracks, testing locks. I gripped the handle of a kitchen knife I'd grabbed in panic, my palms slick with sweat. A sudden thud rattled the glass of the back door. I nearly dropped the knife. He was testing that one now. I bolted upstairs and cracked the kid's door open. Lucas stirred, sitting up groggily. "What's wrong?" he whispered. "Shh," I hissed. "Stay in here. Don't come out no matter what. Promise me." His wide eyes met mine. He nodded. Emma didn't even stir. I shut the door softly and pressed my back against it, breathing hard. From below came a voice, muffled but clear enough to slice through the storm. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." It wasn't pleading anymore. It was a promise. I pressed the phone to my ear again, whispering to the dispatcher who was still on the line. "He's still here. He's trying the doors." "Officers are close," she assured me. "Stay upstairs. Stay safe." But safe wasn't how I felt. Safe felt like a fairy tale, and I was trapped in a house that suddenly seemed fragile, its walls paper thin against whatever was outside. Then, silence again. No footsteps, no voice. Just the rain. I didn't know if that was better or worse. Red and blue lights finally cut through the rain, washing across the curtains like salvation. I sagged against the wall, relief crashing over me so hard I almost cried. But when the officers moved through the yard with flashlights, they found nothing. The man was gone, vanished into the dark beyond the 7-Eleven's glow. One officer, tall with tired eyes, asked me to recount everything. His pen scratched on a small notepad as I told him about the blood, the knock, the circling footsteps. When I repeated the words, "It'll be easier," he frowned. "Probably some drifter," he said finally. "Maybe got into a fight. Happens around here more than you think. You did the right thing not letting him in." But his expression told me he wasn't sure. The officers promised to patrol the area, then left me with their card and a warning to keep the doors locked. The house felt emptier once they were gone, like their presence had been a shield I didn't realize I needed until it was gone. I stayed awake until the Hendersons returned after midnight, smiling and thanking me as if nothing unusual had happened. I didn't tell them everything, just that someone had knocked and the police had come. Their relief was quick and shallow. I don't think they ever grasped how close it had felt. When I finally got home, my mom hugged me tight, confused by the way I clung to her. I couldn't find the words to explain. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't stop replaying the night. The knock, his shifting voice, the sound of his footsteps against the siding, and that phrase, "It'll be easier." What would have been easier? If I'd opened the door? If I'd let him inside with 2 sleeping kids upstairs? The thought made my stomach twist. But another thought haunted me too. What if he really had been hurt? What if I'd let someone die out there in the rain because I was too afraid? Both possibilities gnawed at me. I avoided Lancaster Drive for months, but eventually life forced me past the 7-Eleven again. The neon still flickered, the pavement still reflected its colors in the rain, but to me it wasn't just a convenience store anymore. It was a reminder. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I still hear his voice in my head, whispering through the storm. You'll regret this. Maybe he was right, because no matter how much time passes, I still do. Fear can cloud judgment, but so can misplaced kindness. That night taught me that protecting those you're responsible for must come before every other impulse, even compassion. Because sometimes danger doesn't announce itself with malice. It comes wearing desperation. And the hardest part of growing up is learning when to lock the door and keep it shut.